For more on the situation, I want to bring on Ford O'Connell, a GOP strategist and a Florida business owner. So, Ford, when we talk about this concept of reopening schools, we just heard Dr. Fauci says that it differs depending on region to region. And I think that's an approach generally that the country has been taking, whether it's schools or whether it's businesses reopening. Do you think that is the right approach to go down?
Well, I think it's absolutely the right approach to go down, and we do need to reopen the schools, and particularly right here in Florida, because honestly, if the parents can't, if the children don't go to school and the parents can't go to work, it's important to follow the science, but it's also important to get people back to work.
And I think that's an important point, too, the back to work thing, because whenever we talk about this subject, it's always public health versus people getting back to work. And I think that we don't talk about the lockdowns enough, what's really behind them, too. I mean, we see, for example, opioid overdoses on the rise. We see depression, suicide on the rise. There are other things to bring into this equation when we talk about people not working, other than the fact that they're missing paychecks, something else that is very serious that we need to talk more about as well. So when we look at, for example, in Florida, where cases are on the rise right now, do you suspect that Governor Ron DeSantis will take a similar approach to what we're seeing in California, where they're walking back some of those restrictions, or I should say imposing new restrictions as cases go up?
No, Governor DeSantis doesn't want to go backwards. What he's done here, which is very wise, is he's allowed the local governors and the local mayors and the local county commissioners to take control for their area, because Florida is as diverse as the United States, and there is not a one-size-fits-all plan for Florida. It's what works best for certain areas. What works in Palm Beach is not going to work in Jacksonville, and we need to listen to the folks on the ground in those places.
No, I think that's very well said, because for example, when we look at the state of Florida, the media right now wants to put a lot of scrutiny on Governor DeSantis, but I think it's worth noting that what he did early on saved saved thousands of lives as compared to what happened in New York. We can talk about what New York Governor Andrew Cuomo did in regard to sending sick people back to nursing homes. I mean, that was a fatal policy, and for the most part, he's gotten a pass for that by a lot of the media, although I do have to give credit to Jake Tapper last night on CNN, who did say it's absurd that he's going on a victory tour touting his accomplishments when there were 33,000 New Yorkers who were killed. So looking at what Florida did right in this regard, where we can talk about it from a public health perspective, but we also can talk about it from the economy once again as well. So what are people in Florida saying about the state of the economy since they didn't shut down the same way?
Well, look, a lot of folks in Florida are very happy with Governor DeSantis and President Trump and their push to get back to work. I think where Florida's been hit the worst is in the hospitality and the tourism industry. And I agree with you. It's a false choice. Public health and the economy are inextricably linked. What Governor DeSantis did right compared to Governor Cuomo of New York is he actually went and tried to protect those who are most vulnerable. In Florida, we have an outsized senior population. We have some of the lowest community living, assisted living deaths in this
Yeah.
country. And frankly, when you look at our mortality rate, it's 1/10 of what it is in New York. It's that fear mongering about, gee, coronavirus cases are spreading in Florida, but our mortality rate is low. And that is what really matters going forward.
Absolutely. In fact, on this program, we are basically ignoring cases at this point. We're looking at hospitalizations, ICU beds, deaths, things that give us a better idea of exactly where we stand when it comes to this crisis. Because to your point, with more testing comes more cases, not to mention the fact that there probably were more cases in this country earlier on than we even knew about to begin with. But when we talk about this issue, too, I think it's important to bring in the PPP program, really what that did for many people, because it kept people on their getting paychecks, I should say. It kept them on payrolls, and it helped a lot of people out. So looking ahead too, Florida right now is not imposing any new restrictions. Do you think that the federal government, I guess, should take a more wait and see approach when it comes to applying maybe new PPP loans or doing something like that?
Here's what I'm going to say about that, and I think that President Trump has the right approach. We're going to need more PPP because there's so much difference. But what it needs to be done is it needs to be narrowly tailored, and it needs to take away disincentives from not working. The more people we have out on the workforce, the better off and the more secure and the less fearful people are about operating in the coronavirus. Here's the deal with the coronavirus. It's something we have to live with, and therefore we have to figure out how to move forward, and shutting everything down is only going to hurt us.
No, and that's what I'm hearing from a lot of Republican lawmakers, too. It's whether age specific, industry specific, it has to be a little bit more narrowly tailored in order to meet this crisis, rather than just giving it out to anybody who applies for it. Because even when we're looking back at some of the recipients of the last one, I understand that it was a dire situation. They needed to get the money out immediately. But there were a lot of companies that maybe shouldn't have been taking that money. In fact, some did end up returning it. But this time around, I think they are going to be a lot more careful in making sure that that does go to small businesses, people who need this money up front. So I think that's a good sign of what we're looking at moving forward. But Ford O'Connell, I appreciate you coming on, breaking down the situation and what's happening in the state of Florida. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex.